2024 special voting meeting of the Exeter Township School Board. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Mr. Fike, can you take roll call, please?
Jason Mel.
Present.
Julia Schaefer.
Here.
Deborah Bloom.
Present.
Dr. Andrew Battler.
Here.
John Fiddler.
Here.
Dr. Ann Herring. Timothy Morgan.
Present.
Travis Odom.
Here.
Allison Wilson.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fike. In addition to the 8 board members in attendance this evening, we're also joined at the board table by our solicitor, Sharon Montaigne, and members of the school district administration, including Dr. Christy Haller, superintendent, Mrs. Dawn Harris, assistant superintendent, Dr. Josh Hoyt, director of teaching and learning, Mrs. Diane Skornovaki, director of human resources, and Mr. Brian Fike, who serves as our business administrator and board secretary. Moving on, there are no amendments to tonight's agenda, and there are also no one has signed up for public comments unless someone would like to come up. Okay, moving on to committees, education with Dr. Battler.
Thank you, Mr. Mill. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following staff conference.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Can somebody just tell me exactly what ESP stands for?
It's Exeter Support Staff Union.
Oh.
We're part of PSEA. The teachers have the teachers union, and then the support staff have their own union.
So this
and
is the
Patty,
support
yes,
staff.
and Patty Soreski is
Okay.
their vice president.
Sorry, I looked up ESP
No, that's okay.
online and it
Yeah.
came up with a lot of things, so I just want to make sure.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the Memorandum of Understanding for the Senior High School Internship Program with the Reading Hospital for the 2024-25 school year. It is
Second.
attached.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
That's the end for my committee.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Battler. Mrs. Wilson, personnel.
Okay, we have a bunch of things on the agenda for personnel as it is preparation for our new school year. So it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following resignations: certificated staff and support staff.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following retirements.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Yes.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
All right, and we thank them for their combined 14 years of service. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following appointments: certificated staff, support staff, and extracurricular staff.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following transfer. And there's one certificated staff.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following change of status: support staff and certificated substitutes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following additional assignments. support staff.
Okay, and we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
That's everything. Thank you, Mr. Mel.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Mr. Odom, athletics and extracurricular activities.
It is recommended the Board of School Directors approve the 3-year agreement between Exeter Township School District and Albright College to provide facilities and services as delineated in the attached agreement for the varsity polo team and swim team. This contract is under review by district solicitor. Approval is pending on the solicitor's recommended changes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just a question, Travis, as far as you know, is this the same deal we've had with them, same rates and everything?
I'm sorry, I do not know that.
Actually, I can answer that. It is the same arrangement it's been in the past.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We
very
we
much.
are trying to tweak some of the language, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
So question I have is this the first time that they've done a formal agreement with us?
Yeah, I was under the impression that we had a formal agreement, but according to Mr. Legath, this is an agreement now to formalize our use.
Okay,
So
but the rate hasn't changed, you're saying?
I don't believe so, but
Okay.
they wanted to, I believe that they actually wanted 5 years, Brian, is that correct? And we
Yeah,
decided
they
to do
did
the
one.
3.
Okay,
5, so I think we asked for 3 with maybe an option, but, yeah.
okay, thank you. Any other discussion? And I'm sorry, Mrs. Montaigne, was there is additional review or additional changes, modifications you do need to make to this agreement?
Yes.
Okay, so do I need to amend the motion to approve pending?
Doesn't it say approved pending?
Okay,
Yeah.
we already do have that in
Yeah.
there in the motion? Okay,
Yeah,
perfect,
the
thank you.
reason we put that pending is swim season starts the 15th of this month.
Okay,
So
all
we
right.
couldn't wait till the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
That is all for my committee, Mr. Mel.
Thank you, Mr. Odom. Just looking here, public comments for non-agenda items, no one has signed up. And if there are no objections, we'll adjourn this special voting meeting. Okay, hearing none, the special voting meeting is adjourned. I'm not going to actually hit the gavel because that'll confuse some people around here. All right, so moving on, we're going to jump right into our Cal meeting. And Mr. Fike, could you go ahead and take roll call again, please?
Jason Mell,
Here.
Julia Schaefer,
Here.
Deborah Bloom,
Here.
Dr. Andrea Battler,
Here.
John Fidler,
Here.
Dr. Ann Herring, Timothy Morgan, Travis Odom,
Here.
Allison Wilson,
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fike. Meeting minutes are attached. Does anyone have any changes or discussion they would like to make regarding meeting minutes for the July 16, 2024 board voting meeting?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
On page 18, there is a quote from a bill by Representative Marla Brown, and I think we need to add a sick. She says, without clear legal boundaries, government entities and social media platforms may seek to exploit their authority to silence dissent, D-E-S-C-E-N-T. I think she means dissent, D-I-S-S-E-N-T. So I would like to suggest that we put a sick after that so that the reader knows that's her mistake and not ours.
To be honest, I don't know if that is her mistake or ours. I could, we could check. We'll check regardless, though.
Well, either way.
We'll get it
should-
corrected.
It should be changed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Moving on, there are no amendments to the agenda tonight. Just for the record, Dr. Hearing is here at 6:10. And there are no public comments on agenda items. So we're going to move right into committees. Education with Dr. Badler.
Thank you, Mr. Mel. It is reported that the following field trips within the 60-mile radius have been approved for the ninth grade students at the senior high school to be traveling to the BCTC East Campus and West Campus to learn about opportunities on October 15th and 16th. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following field trips beyond the 60-mile radius. The senior high wrestling team traveling to the Roland E. Powell Convention Center in Ocean City, Maryland to participate in the War on the Shore tournament, January 3rd through the 4th, 2025. One day of school will be missed. Oh, dude, thank you. So sorry, Mr. Mel, thanks. See, this is why we shouldn't do voting, and that, my bad. Okay. All right, nobody has any questions. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the early graduation request for student 9312425 per district policy 217 in January 2025. I don't think anybody has any questions about that. The next three are recommendations for tuition agreements between New Story Schools and the Exeter Township School District for education services for 3 separate students for the 24-25 school year. The costs are $104,220, $80,460, and again $80,460. And finally, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve a settlement agreement and release between the parents individually on their own behalf and on behalf of their minor child, student 930-2425, as proposed, and further authorize the Board President and Board Secretary to execute the settlement agreement and release on behalf of the district. If there's no questions on any of that, we will be moving B through G to the voting meeting.
Okay.
And that's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Badler. Actually, Mrs. Bloom, would you be able to handle the Finance and Audit Committee?
I would, except for A, state.
That's okay. That's administration for the first one. Yep.
Thanks, Sheldon. Okay, so we wanted to share with the board and the community what the budget update looks like. As you know, the state legislator did pass the budget several weeks ago, and so we wanted to let you know what those numbers look like and what that meant for us. There's been a lot of chatter. There was an article in the paper about this historic funding that happened, and so, you know, what was Exeter's share in that? And I can tell you we are very appreciative to the governor for his proposed budget, and we're thankful to the legislators who worked together to get this budget to pass. But it is not what we had initially hoped for, because we thought we might be getting more money. Thankfully, Brian did not budget 100%. As to the original proposal, he budgeted about 60% as what was proposed, and you'll see how that kind of shook out for the district. So if we can go to the second page. So the promised funding when the process started with the governor's budget was over $15 million in state funding. And Brian projected that we would get $15,600,000. The actual funding that we received was $15,656,931. So Brian was $6,713 off in his calculation, which is pretty impressive. Oh, here we go. He's going to do his math in his head. Okay.
All I can say is I kept on warning you when we came to the last minute, I'm 90% sure we're going to get this amount. Mm-hmm. And it's the only thing that we'll talk about is the way they funded it. It's not the way I projected it to be in the basic education formula. They put it into a grant program. that
Brian,
you're-
don't steal my thunder here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
buddy.
It's under, let it go,
Okay.
and then
Yeah, slow down. We have another slide on that. So if we could go to the next slide. So this is the slide that Brian is talking about. So when the governor allocated the funding, the thought was that the majority of the funding would go into what they call the BEF, which is the Basic Education Funding. And where they actually put the majority of the money was in the Ready to Learn grant. So Brian projected that the district would receive almost $12 million in funding in the BEF based on the reports that we were getting from state legislators and then other conferences that we attended, webinars that we participated in. And we came in about $261,000 less in that category. In special education funding, Brian projected that we would receive about almost $3 million, and we did. We actually received $49,000 more than what he projected. The Ready to Learn grant, Brian projected based on last year that we would get about $542,000, and that came in at $783,000 and a little bit more. So that's where the majority of the money was placed. It was placed about $240,000 plus. And then our safety and security grants, Brian projected that we would receive almost $200,000, and we received a little bit more than $170,000, which was a deficit of $21,000. And you can see that the total then he projected was about $6,000 difference on the plus side for the district. The difficulty is, while we're grateful for this funding, is that the Ready to Learn grant is that. It's a grant. So we're allocated those funds. However, that's an area that next year they can cut back on. In addition to it, when the state or the federal government gives you a grant, that money is essentially earmarked to be used on very specific expenditures. And along with this Ready to Learn grant, even though, yay, they gave us more money, they also gave Brian about 20 things that he can only spend the money on, which then becomes very challenging to the district. So at this point, I'm going to let Brian share with you a little bit about why this becomes challenging for him as the business administrator, because it's great that we have this budget. It's great that we received more money, but we're now starting on the next budget, and it'll become very difficult for him to predict what the 25-26 budget's going to look like.
Yeah, so my concern is by putting in the grant, you have to apply for that grant. They can actually deny you, but since the money's there, I doubt they will deny. But it's not part of the basic education formula, which you set a base every year, so if they give you zero, you at least get the same amount. Since it's not part of that base, if they give a 0% increase and don't give you anything in the Ready to Learn, you're actually having a huge decrease from what you had the previous year. The Ready to Learn is specific to mostly programs. The existing Ready to Learn grant we have this year is $542,921. It's been the same for like 5 years. And we've been using that to fund full-day kindergarten. We've actually used that Ready to Learn grant ever since we went from half-day to full-day kindergarten. Full-day kindergartens cost us a lot more, so we can continue to fund more of it. We have the programs that we can, use that money for, because there's no, supplant. There's no supplant requirements, so we can fund existing programs with that, so it will be used that way. They also had a small portion in there, which is called tax equity. That was specific to either offsetting future tax increases, offsetting assessment changes, or decreasing debt service. This year I can use that portion to offset assessment changes, because we had some major assessments. I know Sharon can attest to that, that dropped. We had increase in residential and decrease in commercial, and it was only commercial that you can offset, so we can offset this year. In future years, if they keep this same funding formula and that tax equity portion, what I would suggest is we use that to pay for buses, because we can avoid debt. Instead of leasing the buses, we pay for cash. So that would be a legal use of those funds. But those funds are, there's specific funds, we need new buses. We have to get buses every couple of years. So it's avoiding debt or lease, and lease is considered a debt. So we can pay for cash on those. Because hopefully we're done with the commercial assessment changes, but if we have future assessment changes, we can use that portion. I think it's about $172,000 is the tax equity portion, But the one thing I want you to know is that is not BEF, so they don't have to refund that next year. For BEF, they usually have a hold harmless. You don't get less than when you had the previous year unless you decrease in pupil size. And one other thing to note, I don't think we have major changes in Pennsylvania's student population, but our BEF is adjusted based on our October 1st numbers for the, it's a per pupil allotment. So there could be a small change on that. The one other thing, is it not anything about federal on your next slide?
No, you can keep going, Brian.
Okay.
You're good.
The one other thing to note, and I think we did mention this in June, we lost money in IDA funding, which is federal funding, and which is about 50 or 60,000, and we lost another 40 or 50, Mr. Hoyt, in title. So we lost about $100,000 in federal funding this year. Now, it was not that the federal government cut the education funding. The federal government reallocated based on poverty populations, and there's other districts that are more poor than us, so we lost some of our funding and they got more. And that's not Pennsylvania, they redo that every year based on national poverty averages. Am I correct on that, Mr. Hoyt?
That is correct.
Okay. So we did get additional funding, but we also lost about 100,000. Now, I did tell you that in June, so we knew that was coming on the federal end.
Dr. Haller, can I just add something about when you started, you were talking about the funding announcement in the news media, and, obviously all of the news outlets covered the big funding announcement. If I were a community member, those funding announcements, I think it would be very easy to interpret them as this was somehow new money or unexpected money for school districts. So I just wanted to be really clear that we knew that money was coming. This isn't anything additional that we got on top of what we were kind of planning for and expecting. And that's how Brian built that projected budget. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up, because as I read a lot of the news articles, I was like, if I read this as a community member who wasn't, in the know about the budget process, I might think that this was lots of
windfall.
extra money
Right.
that the district got that they didn't know about. And so I just want to make that point really clear.
And I do want to add that I'm on the legislative committee of PASBO, and the state association was telling business managers, do not budget 100% of what the governor's budget was back in February. And I'd say 85 to 90% did not. Some budgeted a lot less, because they passed their budgets in May, and it didn't look as good in May as it did at the end of May. But there are some out there that went with 100% of governor's budget. Now they're going to have a shortfall because they budgeted the full amount and they're not getting the full amount. And that's it'd be nice if the governor or the state would have passed their budget by June 30th, when we would have been able to make a revision. But they waited to, what was it, June 41st this year?
At least it was this year.
So a couple of takeaways. Again, we are very thankful for the work that was done in Harrisburg to secure additional funding for schools. However, the fact remains that a school district budget is based on assumptions. So our budget is primarily based on the numbers that we had last year, and then the business administrator predicting based on what they're hearing out of Harrisburg as to what funding is going to look like moving forward. And that doesn't take into account what inflation looks like or some other catastrophic event that a school district may or may not face. And then you also have the federal government piece. The other takeaway from this is that when we receive this money, it is earmarked by the federal government and the state government as to what and how we can spend a lot of those funds on. So oftentimes, people in the community will say, hey, Chrissy, well, you got this much money, why couldn't you just use it for this? Well, it's the simple answer is because we may not be able to, we can't. Because when they give us this money, they also give us a list of things as to what we can use the money for, and very clearly what we can't use the money for. So the money that's listed here, the allocated state funding, there's rules that Brian has to follow with how he is spending that money and how he is organizing that within the budget. And that is monitored very closely because we're audited every year. So every year, every district is audited to ensure that school districts are in compliance with how and what funding was supposed to be used for. So that's another really important takeaway that we want to make sure that our community knows, that we need to make sure that we're following the rules for the money that we receive. So if we could go to the next slide. And it's just a reminder to all of us. There we go. It's just a reminder to all of us and to our community that while we received increased funding at the state level, we lost $100,000 at the federal level. And in our community, the majority of the school district's funding comes from the local taxpayer. 67% comes from the local taxpayer. And again, we're hopeful that with the fair funding lawsuit that was filed and then subsequently won by school districts, that we may see some improvement, or we may see some movement again with cyber charter schools, which costs our district approximately $1.8 million. But until we see those types of changes, this is essentially what the breakdown of the budget looks like for the foreseeable future, that in the majority of school districts, the school district is funded by the local taxpayer. So that's where we are, and probably starting in October, we will start sharing with the board some information about what the 25-26 school district budget is going to be looking at moving forward, and how we're planning for that. Does anybody have any questions?
Can you go,
I do have a question. What,
Okay, I'm going to put you on speaker then. He'll be here shortly. All right?
what if any practical effect will we see because of the $100,000 reduction in federal funding? Will any programs be affected, kids not being taught?
No, with the title programs, we've already committed to teachers. It'll just be less that we'll be able to charge off the title, and more will come out of our regular education. So there will be a shortage, but I don't think we can really adjust anything. The only good thing is title and the federal programs run from September through September. So we can make an adjustment at the beginning of next year, or charge more to next year and do less next year,
Well, okay, do less, what does that mean? I mean, are students going to be affected, or?
We're not going to cut out 1/10 of a teacher.
No, the majority of our...
So it'll come out of regular funds.
The majority of our title funds that we use go to paying salaries.
Right.
That's where the majority of that goes to. So it would just now come out of the other portion of the budget. And you may recall going through the budget process last year, we were able to eliminate 6 teaching positions through attrition. And that was very helpful to the budget, because we do employ over 600 people. So we have 600 salaries, and many of them are full-time with benefits. So that's why that part of the pie, when we shared that, is the largest part. It's about 70%. So a reduction, whenever we can reduce our staff because of enrollment, we've taken the opportunity to do that. But we've just now shifted some of the salaries into the other portion of the budget.
Yeah, I think if Josh can verify, I think we charged 75% of the reading specialists and some of the others to title, and the other 25 is to regular ed. So we might be 30% to regular ed and 70% to title.
So we're just going to be shifting that money from one part of the budget to another?
Yeah, because
Okay.
the programs have to be there. You know, we won't be able to make the adjustment until next year's,
Right.
you know, and that
Yeah,
might be in supplies or something like that.
I'm currently applying for the funding for the following year. So, for example, one of our intervention specialists, like, because we can only use Title I funds for 2 of our schools because we have 2 Title I schools, so only those funds can apply there. It has really strict guidelines. So previously, one of our interventions, the intervention specialist, was 100% funded through Title, is now 75. And then for Title III, that has very strict stipulations as to how those funds can be used through ESL. Title II we use for staff reduction, to use for salary, to offset when we have a larger class size, to meet within our class size range. And then Title IV we use for PBIS as a mandated framework that we have to use. So we used funding for that. So we just had to do some realigning and some little stricter budget constraints on some of those things, but at this point, they haven't impacted students. It's just the funding decrease was minor, but it still has an impact. But
So, sort of like moving it from your savings account to your checking account. I mean, it's
to a certain
different
degree,
money,
yes.
but my concern was, are any students going to be affected? I think I hear you saying.
Yeah,
no.
not right now, but it's that types of funding, I can't really move it anywhere. It's to use for like, I can now take it and allocate it towards like something as other building, like Title I is only for Lorraine and Jacksonwald. And Title II is just for where we have that increased class size for reduction, which is in a specific building right now. So it does make it challenging, that aspect, because where we did get the increase in Title IV, that's where you have the most wiggle room. So that was a little bit helpful, but we would want to see, we would not want to see a decrease in our Title I funding because we use those for so many of our reading specialists in the 2 title buildings.
Okay, but I was following you, now I'm lost again. The $100,000 that we lost in federal funding,
It was
I
about,
thought you said we're going to be able to move that 100,000 over to make sure that no students are affected. Did I misunderstand something?
no, we're paying that difference out of the general fund and not out of the federal funds. We're paying that out of our local funds, if you want to call it that.
I mean, I would say ultimately.
It's coming from the taxpayer now instead of the
Right.
federal
Correct.
So
government.
ultimately,
Yeah.
Okay, so-
students are affected based on the budget that we eventually approve as 9 board members here. So that's where that comes into play. If we don't pass a budget that maintains the programs and services that we're currently offering, then yes, it will affect the students.
But for right now, there's no effect on students?
No, because of the way it runs from September through,
Right.
but next year, we'll have to figure out, we're going to have to put more towards out of taxpayer portion, our local portion.
Right.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So every reduction does hurt the district. And if we want to keep the programs that we have in place while continuing to meet the increase in the expenditures you have, that's what causes there to be the need for the tax increase. So while Brian's an excellent business administrator and was able to calculate what the funding, he thought the funding was going to look like, and he was $6,000 difference. That was also because we were very aggressive in eliminating the positions. It just so happened that it occurred that way. But when we started the budget process last year, we were looking at a 5% increase. And I'm sure that a number of you saw the Reading Eagle article that highlighted what the increases were across the county. And we weren't the only ones impacted by increase in expenditures, loss of ESSER funds, and other projects that districts may or may not have going, where we came in at 3.25. I know that some districts came in at 0%, and they're very fortunate because they receive a significant amount of federal funding, or they have a very large commercial tax base. We don't have either of those things. So that's why the majority of the school district funding comes from the local taxpayer. And unfortunately, no one wants to see their taxes go up, but until the state changes how they fund schools, this is how you have to fund them. Now, can I say that, this year we're going to be able to eliminate more positions through attrition? I don't know that we can. If we can, we certainly will do that. But that's, if we want to keep the standard of education that we currently have in Exeter, which as a parent here, I think I would put it up to any other district, then that's going to precipitate most likely a tax increase. So, again, we're hopeful that with the lawsuit that was won by the school districts here in Pennsylvania, that there'll be more movement to give funding to the schools, but we certainly can't bank on that. But what we do know is that because the majority of the increase in the funding went to the Ready to Learn grant and not the BEF, it's going to be very challenging for Brian to make predictions or assumptions based on this year's funding, because that money is in no way at this point guaranteed. If it would have went to the BEF, the basic education funding, it would have been a lot cleaner for him. But with it going to a grant, you can see it in the safety and security grant. We were anticipating $192,000, and it came in at $172,000. That's a $21,000 difference. You start adding that up, $21,000 here, $100,000 lost from title funds. That starts to be millage. So, we need to be thoughtful about that as we move forward, and that's why we start now with thinking through the budget.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to add is there was one other new reimbursement the state put in the budget, a charter school tuition reimbursement. And it's exactly what it is, a reimbursement based on what your charter tuition was to the cyber schools during the year. We are eligible up to $172,000. They haven't come out with their criteria, but from what I'm hearing, we'll probably see that the first quarter of next year. So that will be a revenue that, that's some help. It's not the charter school reform we wanted, but hey, anything, if we get 170 back when we pay, 1.7 million out, it's at least it's 10% reduction. But
Shifting gears, we heard a lot about that lawsuit. There was a lot of rah-rah and parades and balloons and things when we won. But what's happened since? And where is that on? What kind of timeline are we looking at?
the judge sent it back to the state to come up with a funding formula and a way to fix it. They came out with a shortage as of now. It's like 6.8 billion, I believe.
Right.
But to put that in perspective, the same type of lawsuit was in California and settled or won in 2012, and they still don't have a funding formula to meet the lawsuit.
right.
Okay.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because the states have to come up with money to do it, and the only ways they can do it is they can't rob Peter to pay Paul to keep on funding. They're going to have to raise taxes somewhere.
So I'm going to close up this part of the presentation, but just leave you with the thought of, we are definitely looking for cost-saving measures as much as we possibly can. So you'll see that in your agenda, we have a representative from Train here this evening to revisit with you the idea of solar. The district has spent a lot of time talking about solar, looking at solar, and with the idea that perhaps there would be some grant opportunities that would come about at some point. Well, that time is now, and we happen to be a district that is much further along than other districts because of the work that was done by Dr. Hamburger and Brian to be thoughtful as to what solar could potentially look like for us. And so we do have a representative here from Train tonight to talk to the board about what solar potentially could look like today with the grants that are available.
And I just want to start out, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
We're not ready for that yet, though.
Okay.
Yeah, we still have other items on the agenda we got to quick go through. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Well, should be very short, though.
Yeah, for some reason, lost the connection.
Okay, so that's it for the state briefing. Thank you very much, Dr. Haller. Mrs. Bloom, could you pick up with item B? Mrs. Bloom, sorry, there you go.
Sorry, there we go. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves the appointment of Diane Skornavachi as the management representative to the Berks County School District's Health Trust for a 2-year term beginning July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. And item C, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the ETEA's recommendation for the representative to the Berks County School District Health Trust Board of Trustees and Executive Committee for the 2024-2025 school year be Brian Witowski, effective July 1st, 2024.
Okay. Hearing no discussion, I think we're ready to move on to Train's solar presentation with Mr. Fiddler's committee.
Yes, and I'm just going to turn it right over to Brian for the
Okay.
introductions.
All right, before we start, I want to go back and state as before, we're only looking at solar to save money, not to be green, to anything else. I have no political agenda. I'm just saying I'm looking at a way to save money. The previous time we looked at what was called a power purchase agreement because it wouldn't cost us anything to build a plant, but we would have had set rates for a 20-year period. And I know at the last minute people were worried about where the rates are going to be, plus having to commit for a 20-year period. So with the governor's budget and the state budget, they actually put a grant program out there called Solar for Schools, and you're allowed to apply up to $5 million for the program, and you're allowed to apply for 50% of the cost of the program. With that, there's also federal grants, which is a tax credit of 40% of the cost of the program, which they changed the law last year that municipal governments and school districts can actually take cash because they don't pay taxes, so it wasn't available to them because you didn't have a tax credit, so now you can actually get taxed. One thing I did find out is once the project's done, it takes about 2 years to process that request, but it's about 40% of the program. Also, there is rebates from the electric companies, but those we don't know exactly what it is yet. We're getting rebates back on the ESCO project we're doing at the high school and the HVAC project, and there's also the what do they call it, REX, I forget what the term.
SREX.
SREX that you can get over life, but it is very possible that you still have to put the money up front to build it. You take, we'll talk about this more later, but you would take out what you call swing loan or a floor planning, you pay interest on it until it's built, and then put in for the, once before we even do that, we'd apply for the grants, get the approval and the grants, then we get the swing loan, build the things, and once it's done, get reimbursed by the grant, reimbursed by the government, and we're talking about a 3-year payback. Because you're going to end up paying interest and stuff the first 2 or 3 years. So this is a new twist in what we're talking about before. I just want to say again, I'm looking at trying to save money. I computed yesterday with the new med ed rates that just came out. My wife was really upset, but I computed we're saving $125 a month at Awatin right now for an old small array we put on the building just to get LEED Gold, but it's putting out 44 kW an hour to 3 different legs of the building, and it's only covering lighting. So we are saving that amount at Awatin. It's an older array. It's only 175 watt panels. The newer watts are 550. If we did that, we'd be saving over $1,000 a month right now at Awatin on electric because of the array we have there now. So it does work. I'm not looking at it to save money. I'm just looking to try to decrease the cost. And I'll introduce Andrew Odell from Train. And we also have his engineer on the phone in case we have any technical, and your engineer is Mike.
Mike Rivera.
Mike Rivera is on the phone.
He's on the call. He
So-
leads up our solar division in the
Right.
company, and he's on the call.
Okay. So you want to start, Andrew?
Yes, thank you very much for having me again. We had a good discussion in April. At that time, as Brian mentioned, we went over a scenario. It was kind of a large project scenario, if you recall, 5 megawatt system we went over. I'm just going to kind of advance through here real quickly. And I thought it was working when I just tried it, but now it's not. There we go. So we went through some scenarios last meeting. We went through a little bit about our background at Train and all the solar projects we're doing around the country, both in school districts, universities, institutional, prisons, commercial, all sorts of different examples. And really, right now is sort of a perfect storm, a good storm, a perfect combination of opportunities for solar. As Brian mentioned, the incentives are really kind of a once-in-a-generation type of incentive situation right now. In April, we went over with you guys, like I said, a scenario of a 5 megawatt system. This was kind of a large system, we would say, and it really uses all of your buildings within 2 miles of Awatin, because the way that the program works is if you're within 2 miles of Awatin, you can capture that usage as part of your solar system and maximize the benefit of it. So we had structured that. It is a large system. It's really kind of as large as you go. The incentive can get larger as percentage, and the financials, sort of work out in a percentage manner. So we went through this last time. Since then, we've been asked, and you guys in the board asked us to continue researching and looking at this, and you'd like to go to the next step. So we came back and talked to the administration. We got some feedback that you might want to consider different size systems, maybe small, medium, large. There's certainly lots of scenarios with these systems. And we also presented a development agreement, which is our next step forward. If we want to get serious and move forward through the process, we do a development due diligence agreement. We'll talk about that in a second. So I didn't want to belabor this last meeting, but just to give you a little reminder about what we talked about last time, we went through your current energy bill, your existing of 6.8 kWh of energy use, and we kind of walked through your current costs and what the cost would look like with a solar system. So I won't go through all of that again, but this is some of the summary slides. And I want to jump ahead to kind of what we have come up with for a new system. So we talked about a very large system, maximizing your solar capacity. This is an example of a smaller system. We would call this about a 1 megawatt system, a little larger than 1 megawatt. And I want to just, again, introduce Mike Rivera on the call. I just want to make sure, Mike, they can hear you on the call.
Sorry that I can't join you there on purpose. Hopefully you're able to hear me.
Okay, we do. Thanks, Mike.
One thing I wanted to ask, reason I asked for smaller systems is you're allowed up to 5 million on this year's grant. Next year, they're gonna do the same thing, another 5 million and whatever. So if they'd only approve us for 4 million or 2 million, that means we can build a 50%, which would be, if it's 2 million, a $4 million array. Go again next year and build it, whatever we get and build it up till we have 100% of our electricity. But, I don't want to say we can go for the full amount, but I'd only go for what we know we're going to get reimbursed, and it's zero out of pocket, except for the interest over a couple years, and then just build as we go. So, I mean, if they gave us 5 million, we could build a $10 million array. If they gave us 4 million, $8 million array. But if we don't go after the grants, someone else will, and someone else will get them. And right now, we're probably way ahead of everyone else. Because today I got 3 different solicitations in the mail from different companies, wanting us to talk to us about the HB 1032 bill.
At what point in the process will we know about how much we'll get reimbursed for from the
Well,
grant?
the applications open up, I believe, the end of September, right?
Yes, yes.
And like our regular safety and securities were through, what's it, PCCD, this one's through DCNR. When DCNR had grants before, they only had a 90-day window. PCCD only had a 60-day window, so we're not sure if it's going to be 60 days or 90 days for them to approve or disapprove the grants. I imagine it's going to be 90 days, but we'd know probably by the end of December.
Yes, and really, our next step is a development agreement, which does the due diligence of completing all that grant paperwork and all of the engineering and everything required to do that, to position the district in the best way of getting the grant.
And what we need in engineering is we have to, on the grant, you have to prove that it's a feasible project. You have to prove that your electric company has the capacity where you're going to put it to be able to take the electric back into the system, and that they're willing to accept that. And also, I also need to know is what kind of rebates they're offering. So we can actually come back to the board and say, hey, we thought it'd be 100% covered, but actually we're going to get 105% because they're giving more rebates than not. And that's not even including the SRECs that they give you over time, because they're required to do so much in solar right now, so they're paying extra to get your solar power, because I guess truthfully you could sell your solar power to someone in California if it wanted, instead of Med-Ed, but we're not in that brokerage game. We're basically stuck with Med-Ed, and we're not going to play any other games.
Just out of curiosity, on this development agreement, wow, what is going on? Is that I'm gonna step back here. The commitment of the $28,900, is that, so we go through the whole process and we don't get approved for the grant, do we still have to pay that money? Is that the way it reads?
Yes, it is. It is. It's
That's
actual boots on the ground engineering time and money spent to position yourselves. It would be a consultant fee. We'd be your consultant advocate to make sure you get the most bang for the buck with these incentives.
Is that in
And
the
it's-
budget? Have we budgeted for that money?
Not in our regular budget or our capital budget, because I had money in there to fix the array at Watton, but it was only a $500 bill, not a $20,000 bill. So 19.5's in their capital budget for the existing array.
So we have to come up with a difference of $9,500, $9,400.
Yeah. Now, one thing, if we do get the grant, we can reimburse ourselves from that. Because
And-
development costs are covered under the grant. At least that's what I'm told it is.
So you're saying we're risking 10,000
Correct. Yeah.
that we don't have?
And it could be in the form of a purchase order payment, or it could be a breakage fee. In other words, so that we would do the project, you wouldn't owe it unless you never did a project with us. We can structure it either way. The example here is a smaller system. As Brian mentioned, the incentives, you have the just as a quick example, I won't run through too many numbers here, but just an example cost of 3.5 million for a 1 point something megawatt system above. The House bill, we just conservatively assuming 30%, we could potentially get more. We talked about 40-50% from the HB bill, which has passed, but we're assuming 30% conservatively. The SRECs we talked about earlier would be about 847 over 15 years estimated. And then the direct pay ITC would be 1.4 million. That's the 30-40%, in this case would be 40% direct tax credit, which Brian had mentioned. So really the system cost is close to zero over that span. And then I wanted to mention something else here, if this advances here. I think it's just a little, there we go, okay. Well, this is an illustration of that cost. You have that upfront cost, and then the benefit of the utility cost, avoided utility cost is all in blue. So really, as Brian mentioned, you're hedging against inflation, you're hedging against all these what-ifs in the future and getting a huge benefit over, 15, 20, 30 years in the future, however you want to look at it. Our warranties are 25 years for panels, so it gives you an idea of what we think systems, last 30 plus years. So the what I want to show you here, I'm sorry.
Yeah, one difference between this and what we looked at before, we would own it. Unlike before someone else owned it and we were paying them, we would own it, and that's why there's like $100,000 a year because we still have to cut the grass underneath.
And that's why this is so massive. This is a full benefit of the system versus a power purchase agreement where it's really a shared benefit. In the direct purchase, there's maybe a little more going on up front as far as Brian mentioned, coming up with the money in between the gap time of when the incentives come in. But the upside over the lifespan is huge, is the best.
So 2 questions. First, the $3.5 million we have to come up out of cash up front. That's going to be a loan, correct?
Correct, and there's already talked to 4 different banks, and they'd love to do swing loans, because they know that the grant, if your grant is approved, they know it's guaranteed to be paid.
Sure. So, but there would be an interest-only principal, or interest-only for 12
I call
months.
it a swing loan or a bridge loan or whatever you want to call it, but it'd be interest-only for the time of construction.
Do we know what the interest payment's going to be?
Oh, they say with the government rate right now, it's about 5.1. So.
Okay. Where's that in the budget?
That would be next year's budget because it's going to at least be a year or 2 until we'd start something like this.
Okay, that was my first question. Second question is, after the 25-year panel goes away, and because I don't think, maybe some of us will be on this board, who knows? But if I was being optimistic, Mr. Mill. If we wanted to go backwards, if the school district wanted to go backwards and go back to regular electric and not re-up or fix the panels, what's the cost on that?
It's a switch.
It's just
to
that's
basically
not really
decommission the system and just go back to fully grid powered?
correct.
It's basically a switch, isn't it? Because at night, you're on fully grid power. It's during the day you're sending out to the grid.
Okay.
I mean, unless you're talking about tearing the field down and everything out, there's,
No, you already have the infrastructure in place, so there would be no cost to do that.
Yeah, and one thing I also wanted to mention is, because the last time we were having people saying, well, if you have all that electric going out, if the power lines go down, that neighborhood should have power. No, there's fail-safes in the system. That's something they also have to prove to Med Ed and engineering, is that if the grid goes down, your system has to shut off to the grid because they do not want you sending out power to maybe electrocute a lineman trying to fix a line. So that's one of the fail-safes they have to have in the system. Your building will still have power, but the grid won't. It won't be sending out.
Have we analyzed how much we're going to save? Sorry.
It's over 600,000 a year if we had totally off the, had our own system to cover 100% of our electricity.
And is that including the interest and everything we'll pay?
That's after 3 years.
As long-term?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, depending what size system, whenever it goes up, if we do a system that covers 100%, in 2 years and it's up, we're gonna be saving $621,000 a year, but it's, with the interest and, the initial cost, it's gonna be about 3.4-year payback, but after that, it's, it's basically avoidance. And that's what I'm trying to look at, is trying to avoid, trying to save something that we know we're not gonna pay anymore. Now the other thing is, in 15 years, they probably have better solutions, but, I know people still have flip phones and they're fine with those.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the one benefit
I have a question.
here,
Wait, was that Tim?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So if our infrastructure reduces in the next 28 years,
Right.
and we're producing more power than we need, are we able to sell that power back to Med Ed, or is that power come at a loss to us?
No, you actually sell it back. Right now, we're allowed 110%. We can sell 10% more back to them than we use. But, that extra power is settled at the end of each, I think, each year, which is a 14-month. They give you a check back for what you sold more than you used.
So what if we reduce our infrastructure by 25% in 20 years? We shut down a building because we don't need it. And so now we're producing 135% of energy. We can only get paid back for 10% still, correct?
No, it's based on the initial design. So if you use less, I think they'll still pay you back the difference. They have to approve the initial design that you're making sure they're making sure at this day you're not producing more. You can't produce more than 110%. But after that,
Okay.
I think it's whatever it is. What if we had more sunny days one year than the other? You
Yeah.
could probably produce more than 110%.
But
Also, it's worth noting at that point too, that all the electricity, the system will be completely paid for, and so all that electricity is essentially free at that point too. So even if you weren't, I think that's worth noting as well.
Yeah. But see, that's the other part of the engineering. We have to make sure the Med Ed lines, and we're pretty sure, but, they won't give you the guarantee until they get their infrastructure engineering reports that they can accept that type of power going into those lines, but their main line's going down 562, which we don't think there's a problem.
Yeah, and all that due diligence is really important to do up front. The electrical, the infrastructure, with the utility, and also environmental concerns. All of that being worked out ahead of time really positions you guys to get it, to get moving, and also the grants. The grant we're hearing is they're looking for ready-to-go projects that have gone through that due diligence. So that's why we would suggest this development agreement. And I wanted to just not miss this one here, because Brian mentioned it a couple times. The utility rebate is also in play. So in addition to all the other benefits, they have added a kicker bonus program right now with First Energy. They've upped it to 10 cents per kWh of the amount that you've displaced with solar. So in our smaller system example, that would be a $181,000 initial one-time rebate. If you did the original larger systems, that would be up to $500,000 rebate is the max. But that's a really attractive rebate with the utility. That only lasts till September 27th. They need to have a diagram and a projection of the system and the paperwork filled out by September 27th to get the 10 cents. But that is a really nice program they have right now.
Tim, you had another question?
Yeah, just one more question. I was wondering if you could, if Train could further explain. I understand that the $30,000 up front, a little better now not to be a estimate, but a consultation fee. I'm trying to understand what that consultation looks like, because from a district's point of view, why wouldn't we use a third-party consultant as opposed to Train as our consultant, because Train is the seller? So maybe they could go into better detail about why we would need to use them as our consultant as opposed to a third party.
I've added on the slides here, if folks can see it, this is a summary of our development scope, and you could use another party to look at these things. We have a lot of experience going through these. There's multiple facets. It's really the engineering, electrical with the utility in the building. There's the site environmental work, civil engineering. There's the utility analysis and energy engineering. There's a number of things that we've already had in motion with this process. We've already started some of these things, but this is really boots on the ground. We're very successful going through this process in this way. We're developing the scope, getting our installation details together as we do it. So we suggest that this is a good way to do it, but it's a good question. Mike, you might want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a good faith effort for us to tick off all the due diligence items along the way, to do everything, because we have a vested interest in capturing as much of the grant funding as possible to ensure success for all of the parties involved too. And so I can respect the thought process there on bringing in a third party consultant, but at the same time, I think part of the benefit is that we're really going to be pushing to win as much as we possibly can for the school district, and have a successful project for everyone involved. So I think that's part of it.
And we're also registered and trained with First Energy as a rebate provider. So we have weekly meetings, we've gone through the whole process to validate, verify rebate opportunities and bring them into projects. So we're very in tune with all of these incentives.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Okay, first question. I noticed that one of the rebates has a payback period of 10 years. So I have two questions. Will we be paying the interest 10 years on that?
It's not actually a rebate, it's SREX, which is...
A grant, I'm sorry, not the rebate.
No, the SREX is...
Yes.
That's money the electric companies pay to say that you gave them your solar power so they can meet their percentage requirements. And that's right now it's up to 10 years. That's not a rebate, that's just an income you'll receive every year based on what you put out there, and like MedEd will pay you. What's XREX stand for?
Solar Renewable Energy Credit.
It's a credit they get for the government to meet the requirement of so much for solar or so much for renewable energy type thing. So they're actually paying you every year for that credit. So you're basically saying, yes, MedEd or whatever electric company, you can use our solar. We're not going to sell it to PenMac or to UGARA or some competitor. You're getting it on your grid, and you can use our credit.
But that's rolled up into the initial cost.
That's yeah.
Well,
Yes.
what we show, we had the question earlier about how do we know the numbers and what the savings is. This is a pro forma, just a simple pro forma summary of what that would look like over time, and this is just the first 11 years. Then we have the next page for up to 20. You see in red, those are the upfront numbers. That's sort of the red is the cost, and then in year one, we anticipate the House bill program Solar for Schools grant coming through. We anticipate the solar renewable energy credits, SREX, coming through year one, but also year 2, 3, 4, and down the line. And then we have the direct pay number is a one-time immediate within the first year.
Right.
And then the electrical bill savings is another one that it would be every year. And then the utility rebate is yet another one, would be a one-time, which we would add to that. But this is really the best way to look at these projects is in a summary financial spreadsheet like this to show the total cash flow. So at the bottom just shows the cash flow by year, and as Brian mentioned, 3-year or so payback, and then it's all black moving forward, and it shows you the cash flow. So that's a good question.
And
Okay, I'm an
electric-
accounting professor at RAC, so I
Yeah.
understand how to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Read financial
I hadn't had a chance to show
statements.
this one yet.
So what is the probability that the law might change in the future for the SRAC? Are those funds guaranteed?
No.
For that 11 years or 20 years
They're
that
not.
they're planned?
No, they're not.
So the
guaranteed.
cash flow situation could actually be worse than what you're
Well,
saying.
It's always
After
happened.
3 years, it's not paying out, it's not really a cash flow anymore, we still don't have electric bill.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we're not
Okay.
getting the additional back, but it's still
Right.
not having an
We're
electric bill.
still not having an electric bill.
And that's what I keep on stressing, I'm looking at trying to avoid a payment.
Mm-hmm. But that is included in this financial
Right.
projection, even though it's not assured.
Right.
Yes, we include it because it is a real factor, and it's always been an element of solar projects. It has been very steady, consistent, but it's not guaranteed. But it has been there for many years.
Okay, and then I have just one more question.
Yes.
How about maintenance costs, expected maintenance costs and unexpected maintenance costs? Let's say a huge storm, hurricane, hailstorm comes through and damages the panels. What would be the financial implication of something like that?
Yes. We do have workmanship warranties, and we have equipment warranties that would cover some of those things. There are maintenance items. We work that into the project, that operating maintenance cost over time. We have things like cleaning of the panels, checking the lines. We have potential shrubbery and things like that, depending on how these get installed. Mike, you might want to speak to a little more detail on that if you'd like.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you know, there's different levels of maintenance plans. The solar system is gonna, you know, there should be an annual inspection and a checkup. We can do preventative, you know, or just reactive maintenance. So the system will be monitored anywhere that it can be monitored, anywhere there's an internet connection. And so we'll have access to real-time performance reports, and we can respond accordingly and send a technician out site if anything ever needs to be addressed, you know, in real time. Now, as far as damage, you know, due to storms or hail, it's worth noting that that's a pretty uncommon thing. The glass that on the solar panels that we use is incredibly resilient. There's a case study from the NREL facility in Golden, Colorado, where just incredible size, you know, nearly golf ball size hail came down and you know, out of a large number of solar panels in their solar array. You know, only one or two had actually suffered any kind of damage, and there's other case studies, you know, just like that one. So, but if something is damaged in that unlikely event, what we'll do is we'll keep reserve panels so that if one does need to be placed out, we always order, you know, a certain small percentage over of whatever we'll need for your installation, and then we can just keep those warehoused and pull them out if we actually need to swap, you know, one or a few out. So we can address that question that way. But as far as operations and maintenance, we definitely have plans for that. We can present more details on that. Again, it's usually you know, one of two options: reactive or preventative, or a combination of both. So.
Okay, so these maintenance costs then are not included in these cumulative cash flows right now that we're looking at. So we would actually expect them to be worse included with the maintenance contract.
That's correct. No, because we would have to make some kind of assumptions, but it does include the initial workmanship warranty, and it does include 25-year warranty on the panels, 10-year warranty on inverters, and then our 1-year workmanship warranty.
But they will take additional maintenance costs every year.
Yes, there will be some kind of cost associated with that, but it's relative to what the paybacks you see in here, it's pretty minimal.
Yeah, I've talked to Carlisle's, had a field in since 2011. Their biggest maintenance is twice a year going in and cutting the weeds. they were considering bringing in sheep to do that, but they were more concerned about sheep getting caught in wires or something like that, so they didn't, but I know other places that'll use animals to clear the brush, but they were more concerned that if sheep got hurt and the students saw it, that they would be in big trouble, so.
So are we,
We're talking a lot where the scrub brush is. We're not taking
Right.
any fields, we're not taking anything else.
what about insurance? Are we going to have to, or are we considering putting any insurance coverage?
I'm guessing right now our maintenance costs could be between $45 and $50, and that's including mowing. Insurance that I'm told is very minimum, you know, as long as it's, they'll look at the specs of the solar panels, but the US-made panels now are pretty solid.
So do we think insurance?
And it's fenced in, and this price would include fencing it in.
So would insurance cover the situation such as hail or vandalism? You know, anything that potentially would
Yeah, whatever.
cause damage?
Depends on what deductible we have right now.
Yeah.
Most of our properties like $15,000 deductible, except for auto is like $1,000, and some other things are smaller.
Okay.
You know, building, those types of things are about $15,000 deductible on major claims.
Okay. Mrs. Bloom, were you okay on your end? You no other questions? Okay, thank you. I did have one question. There was a lot of contention in the last agreement when we were talking about kind of looking at implementing a system and checking everything. And one of the things that had come up was an interconnection fee. And in that agreement, it was stated that the district would have to cover up to $250,000. And if it went over that amount, the district could exit the agreement without penalty. So I guess my question is, what concerns should we have on interconnection fees? Do we see that as an unknown yet if we would move forward with this? And is there any such exit clause where, we could decide to, not move forward with the agreement, but not pay the development costs, or are we always on the hook for that no matter what?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the interconnection fee was really because it's a private company owning it and as a PPA and then paying back to us, so I think they were worried about us pulling out the last minute, and they paid the interconnection, where if you own it itself, that's part of the total cost of the system.
Well, the interconnection fee is really going to be, so when we submit an interconnection application, which is part of what we're proposing to do is part of our services that we're proposing here, is that we want to engage the utility. You submit your interconnection application, and then the utility is going to go through some engineering studies, and they're going to look at the distribution system surrounding the school where we build the system. They might even decide to do what they call a system impact study, which looks at the broader systems surrounding just the distribution lines. And then they'll make an assessment as to whether any infrastructure may potentially need to be upgraded to accommodate the source of power generation. Because the utility has to look at the system as though at any given time, let's say we build 5 megawatts, every utility always looks at it as though at some point in time, all 5 megawatts of that power might go back out onto the distribution system. And so they approach their studies in that way. It's possible that they say, well, at 5 megawatts, we may have to update this transformer or this portion of the line, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars. However, if you were to only build 2 megawatts, we would not have to do that. And so sometimes there's a limiting factor that says the utility will have some threshold that says, it may become cost prohibitive if we get up to this portion, but not if you only size it up to this portion. And so that's another reason why we want to initiate that utility engagement so that we can understand if there is potentially a limiting factor. The interconnection application fees themselves are pretty negligible. That's not where the cost is. It's once they go through their studies and then they say, well, we would need to upgrade this or that. That's where there could be cost. But we just don't know that until we engage them. We give them our conceptual one line and our site plan, and we get that ball rolling. So, and again, that's part of what we want to do here is to prepare a project for success. Is just to get that one line diagram and get that site plan, submit it, the paperwork that the utility wants us to, and then there's no obligation there. It just gets the clock going, and it's their engineers to start seeing if there's going to be any impact or any potential costs that we just won't know until they go through their process.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I guess with the interconnection fee, and I don't know if you know that number off the top of your head, but it's similar systems maybe that you guys have worked on. Do you have any kind of ballpark of what you think you may run into in terms of those fees when you go to the utility?
Just for the application fees and stuff, not for the actual potential infrastructure costs?
Potentially both, I guess I would say.
The application fees are not big. I don't have that number in front of me, but usually they range in the hundreds of dollars to submit the application. And then if they go to broader engineering studies, like a system impact study, those can get into the thousands of dollars. They could range from $2,000 to $15,000. It really depends. But if that's something that you'd like more information on, we can pin that down. But the real costs, come when the utility says, well, this equipment or that equipment needs to be upgraded. It's not so much the interconnection application fees themselves.
No, thank you. No, I appreciate it. I mean, I guess my take on it is, I mean, as we've been talking about solar for, over a year now, probably, off and on, we have considered paying a consultant and other things, and not necessarily opposed to the upfront fee, although it sounds like the grant would cover that should we move forward.
If we get the grant, it will cover that, just like if the utility requires different infrastructure and stuff like that,
right,
that would go right into the grant application as part of the cost.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And like I said, this is different from the PPA. The PPA was a private equity, basically owning the system and renting it back to you for a certain dollar per kilowatt hour. Just guarantee that your rate wouldn't change. This, you basically produce the electricity, and whatever excess goes back out, or whatever you have to pull off the system is only, you're not paying for your own production.
Okay.
And again, I wanted to mention this commitment fee could be either a upfront fee or a breakage fee. It wouldn't be owed at all until it'd just be rolled into the project. And also point out, we have a requirement with this as well. This is, I'm sorry, I keep skipping. These are what we have signed up to do. You'll notice looking at all these due diligence items at the top, and then ensuring scope and pricing. If we can't put together a viable project for some reason, if there's some reason that that you're not able to do a solar system, that you wouldn't be, we couldn't recoup this, this money. Our end of the bargain, we owe you a viable project. So that's part of it as well.
Okay. I have a couple questions, and you just answered one about the viable project and the fee. With regards to the maintenance fees, does that include video monitoring, or I know Brian mentioned it was online monitoring? and that's obviously not shown or showcased up here in the slides, but what is the average cost for maintenance if obviously it's being done by your company versus internally here?
Well, I'll mention that part of it is like the control and the tracking and the performance and the web building, all that. That is part of this whole cost. Everything you see is kind of a part of our, and these are rough numbers, obviously. This is, we need that due diligence to size this thing correctly and everything. But the numbers we're talking about is complete. The only thing it doesn't maybe quite cover is different ideas with maintenance, depending on where you do. If you have grass mowing and things like that, we didn't really figure that in per se because we don't know enough. Brian had mentioned 40,000 a year. I don't know, Mike, do you have any thoughts on potential?
I'm just talking about like your cost to us. I know we would maintain it through our,
Oh, I'm sorry.
like what is the cost from Train to the district to maintain this system if you're in charge of all of technology, that kind of thing? Like the maintenance that Ms. Bloom had brought up,
Or like our maintenance contracts with Johnson Controls or someone else that.
Exactly. Maintaining the system itself, not necessarily the grounds, because that's something that we would do ourselves.
Yeah. Mike, would you want to speak to that? Maybe an example of our maintenance, or as far as maintaining our dashboard and things like that?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, the audio wasn't. I think I understand the question, but so we will include, as far as the monitoring, the online monitoring capabilities, and the online dashboard. That's included, as part of the package in the initial workmanship warranty in the first year. But generally, you can sign up, especially if this is a ground-mounted system where we're probably going to have a cellular modem. Usually, we would buy that in 5-year increments, and so we would just purchase that as part of your upfront cost, as part of the initial system cost as a 5-year thing. So the first 5 years of the online monitoring platform would be included in the system cost. As far as beyond that, it's actual boots on the ground, operations and maintenance, or a maintenance contract. Again, it's going to be capacity based, so it'll ultimately be what system size are we talking about here, and then do we want preventative services? Where we have someone on site once or twice a year to do this. Or are we going to have more of a reactive maintenance kind of centric plan where we monitor it remotely and then we respond when something, when we see something needing attention? The one where we actually have someone walk through the entire array once or twice a year obviously is going to have additional cost to it. But we can structure it in either way, and different end users choose different routes. Because some end users, elect to be more hands-on over time than others. So we could draw up a proposal on that, and what a couple of different scenarios could look like. But it could range anywhere from a few dollars a kilowatt per year, to $5 or more dollars a kilowatt per year. So
we're talking 10 to 15,000, somewhere around there.
Yeah, exactly. Depending on the breadth of the service.
So 10 to 15,000 a year, depending on the size.
Okay.
Now, the other question I have is, when you say monitoring, is that something the schools can use for educational purposes? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It'll come with a dashboard with a student body or customer facing dashboard that's aesthetically pleasing, and then there's a behind the scenes kind of portal too that will train the school district how to use, so that they can see more technical data about how it's performing and how to understand. We can also assign certain email addresses to get production reports, either daily, weekly, or biweekly. So at whatever cadence you want, you get a report in your inbox as to exactly how much electricity was produced the previous day or week or whatever.
So I guess here's a question that piggybacks on the educational portion. Are there any grants that we could use through the educational sector to bring this into like a STEM project if we were to engage this type of?
There's different grants every day. I'm not a curriculum person, so.
We're aware of one district that recently got a grant for that purpose for solar in Lancaster County. I could try to connect you with the details on that. We often bring this into curriculum. That's why we have a couple slides on this. We call it the NC3 program or the BTU crew. We have trained instructors on leading this in the classroom, and as Mike mentioned, either doing it ourselves or training others to do it. We have programs like Energy 101. We have a solar program. We have data analytics. We have a lot of things that really have real world value and real credits. We have programs for middle school up through high school. So it's been one of the drivers of a number of our solar projects, one of the really bonus drivers that have really brought school districts around the country interested in our program is the educational piece. So it's hard to really explain it all in one slide, but if we ever wanted to do like a demonstration or some video conferencing or things like that to see a little bit more detail on that, I'd be happy to try to set that up.
Thank you. And just as the last question to the board and the administration, when we originally spoke about this train project and discussing solar further, we had mentioned possibly engaging with the township on a partnership. Was that explored any further to see if this
It
would?
was explored, but the utilities don't let you cross-connect to
Okay.
other customers. You
Okay.
can cross-connect to your own buildings, but not to other customers.
Not to other customers, okay.
Now,
And I'm guessing the grant wouldn't cover that then either, right? Because of,
no, if they're
it's, yeah.
a charter school, it would, but, but there are grants coming out for municipals that, we could offer them some of the land we're not using up on top of the hill, but,
I was gonna say too, like across from Rifton, is that a feasible spot?
wrong side of the hill. I looked at that a long
Okay.
time ago. It doesn't get enough sun,
Dr. Hoyt, does any of this fit in with the new science standards?
So, part of, like, energy transfer and such are all part of steels. I am aware of, First Energy offer grants. Like, when I was at the IU, I got a $5,000 grant for, STEM-related, initiatives. This also ties into the governor's competition, where a lot of students, will get funding and, education on different projects and prototypes that they create. But this ties in with regards to the whole idea of, build a prototype, evaluate it, assess, which is all steels related. Yep.
In regards to the land for this scaled-down project that we're talking about here, this would still be behind a Watton, correct?
correct, or what I call the scrub brush, or
The scrub.
Non-fields,
Yeah, so it's not going to be touching any soccer fields, any recreational fields that are being used or anything like that. This is all,
It would all be fenced in.
and it'll all be fenced in. Okay.
Additionally, I will mention, this also ties into the career readiness aspect too. So with the career component there are things that students could get as sources of evidence and artifacts as part of their Chapter 339 plan for careers too. So.
Any other discussion?
Just another one. Is the fencing included in the price?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we can, it would go up a lot if you want to do carports and things, but that's just feasible. It'd
Unless
be
you get me a
lot
tulip,
longer
I don't care
payback.
what you do.
I've talked to other districts. There's one district that put in movable mounts that have followed the sun, and they wish they never did. They went back to stationary mounts because engines go in 2 or 3 years, and, you know, poles don't. They last forever.
We'd also be willing to facilitate a kind of a case study visit or web conference or face-to-face visit on the educational piece, but also on a solar system as well, if that would be of interest.
You know, so the first step would be applying for the grant. Once the grant's approved, then the board will have to approve accepting the grant. And that's when you decide if you're really, you know, where you're going with it and, you know, the size. You know, like I said, if you get $5 million, I would suggest we go for a $10 million project. If we get $4 million, we go for an 8, and just, you know, 50%, because we know we're gonna get up to 40% for the federal funds, and then we'll also know by then what the rebates would be, and we'll know the exact cost and, you know, the payback. Right now, you know, based on today's, we're looking at a 3.4-year payback, and then not having electric bills for whatever portion we produce.
Okay, so the, I guess the question I would ask of the board is if anyone, does anyone feel like they don't have enough information to make an educated vote at the next voting meeting for this?
And this is only on the engineering agreement.
This is just on the development agreement of the cost of $28,900 to approve, correct? The development cost,
Correct.
yeah. Okay. All right. I think we're good. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
Mike.
time.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Yep, bye-bye.
And that's it for facilities and transportation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fiddler. Personnel Committee, Mrs. Wilson, do you have anything to discuss?
I do not.
Okay.
We might have more by the time we get to the voting meeting in 2 weeks. We might have
Okay.
some new things, but not, we went through everything tonight already, so.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Hearing, Policy Committee.
Sure. We have up for second reading policy number 800, 815, 815.1, 816, 830, and 830.1. Does anybody have questions? That's everything.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hearing. Moving on to public comments for non-agenda items. Nobody has signed up unless someone from the audience would like to come up and speak.
Actually, Mr. Mel, may I say something, please?
Sure, absolutely.
I just wanted to go back to the Personnel Committee section from the voting meeting where we added all of our paraprofessionals. We had an open house at our ESY program in Awatin Creek, and we advertised that with Jen Breton on Facebook and multiple social media avenues, and we had a tremendous turnout, and that's where all of our paraprofessionals are coming from this week. So we're very pleased with that. And there were a few community members that reached out before and after the event that couldn't attend, and we have them coming in for interviews as well. So we're very happy with that event that we planned.
Great, thank you very much, Mrs. Cornaraki.
Can I add?
You know what, you cut me off earlier, and I'm thinking I'm not going to let you go now. No, go ahead, I'll let you. That's it.
No, I just wanted to say that the summer projects, we had a couple hundred contractors throughout the district are on schedule, and schools will open on time.
There was never a doubt, Ryan.
Never.
No, there's never any
We had a
questions about
lot
it.
of work done this summer.
Good deal.
But
Thank you for sharing that.
We made sure, and air conditioning's starting to be turned back, and, you know, I want to thank everyone for the putting up with some displacements, but we got through it. And sports are actually out there, well, they were practicing to the rain.
All right, thank you for sharing. Okay, in terms of what we're moving to the August voting agenda, we have meeting minutes, items 4B through G, 5B and C, 6A, and 8A. Are there any board members that would like to be heard at this time? All right. Nothing else. Our next meeting will be our voting meeting on Tuesday, August 20th at 7 p.m. The board will meet in executive session immediately following the adjournment of this meeting to discuss safety and security initiatives as well as the status on active litigation. If there are no objections, we'll adjourn the meeting. Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.